Are you ready for pie season? I am hoping that you're feeling up to the task because I'm going to show you the very easiest way for you to make pie crust. I have never had a pie crust fail when I have made it this way. It's so easy. Now, here's the thing. I will rarely ever tell you that you need a certain kitchen gadget in order to make something because I just really like using really simplified things. But this right here, friends, you need a food processor in order to make this no-fail pie crust. And I put the link down in the blog down there. You can click on it. This is the one I really love. I can make a batch of pie crust in here that will either make 4 single crust pies or 2 double crust pies, or you can make 4 galettes or like 20 something individual hand pies. The moral of the story is this little baby will help you make a big batch of pie crust that you can store in your fridge and freezer so that when you want to make a pie, you already have pie crust dough ready to go. So let's dive in. So I gave you the full recipe on how to make the pie crust down in the blog here so that you can come back and make this anytime you want. Now, if you want to make caramel hand pies or you want to make any of our other red tin treats, make sure you click on over to the shop and download the Red Tin Treats ebook. Yes, I printed mine out at a local print shop. We give you permission. You can print a copy out. Just please don't make 500 copies. So how do we make pie crust in the food processor? You're gonna want just the regular blade in your food processor. And first, we're gonna put in our flour. I always hold my hand over the top part so that I don't lose a bunch of flour down in there. Measuring it out. We want to get all of the dry ingredients in here first, and then we're going to pulse it just a little bit so that it mixes all those dry ingredients together, because if we don't mix the dry ingredients together first and we put our butter and shortening in there, then like the piece of butter, chunk of butter could get stuck to a bunch of salt and you could have these like clumps of salt or sugar, and we don't want that. We want it to be dispersed equally. Now this pie crust will work for savory pies or sweet pies. Here is essentially what I do. So if I'm making a sweet pie, I do the full amount of sugar, which is 1 tablespoon of sugar. If I am going to make savory pies, I do half of that amount. And I'm going to use this crust to make some chicken pot pies, which are savory. So I only did half of the amount of sugar. And really, it doesn't end up tasting that much different, but you don't want to have a sweet crust for a savory pie. So that's why I bring it back just a little bit. And that goes for the same if you were going to make like a savory tomato galette or anything like that. Just cut the sugar in half if you're doing savory. So we're going to pulse. So easy, right? Okay, so now our sugar, our salt, and our flour are all mixed together in here. And we're gonna add in our butter, 3/4 a cup of butter. And what I do is I just open the wrapper up, straight out of the fridge. You want the butter to be cold. And I cut it into chunks. If you don't cut it into the chunks, even the food processor does have a little bit of a hard time getting that butter to incorporate really well into the flour. And then even though Crisco is not my favorite thing, yes, you can find organic Crisco if you would like, but we need to put 6 tablespoons in. And I have found that doing half Crisco and half butter gives it a really great texture. It's still really flaky, but you get that buttery flavor in there. And you know, here's the thing, friends. If you're gonna make pie, just make pie. Make good pie crust. because once you see how easy it is to make this, I promise, you're never gonna wanna buy pie crust from that freezer section anymore, because this is just so much better. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sometimes I lose count. We have our butter, we have our Crisco, our shortening, and now what we're gonna do is we're gonna pulse it. And I basically hold pulse down until the flour gets to the point where it looks a little bit damp. I'm gonna show you. So we've pulsed it, the butter and the shortening are incorporated in with the flour, kind of has some chunks in there, which is good. Then take your little top off, and I'm gonna do it on low, and I'm putting half a cup of cold water straight from the fridge, so it's super cold in here, because you don't want to use warm water because it's going to melt your butter and your Crisco, and you really want those to stay in chunks in there. As soon as you see the dough turn into a clump, turn the machine off. That means that all of the little pieces are incorporated together, and I just kind of wipe off the top. It is sticky. The dough should be sticky. Just tell yourself it should be sticky. You don't want to add any more flour to it. Let me show you. Now our dough's all sticky in here. The next thing we have to do is it has to go in the fridge. Don't try to just roll this out straight away. You'll end up having to add so much flour to it that it'll make it kind of tough. Give it at least 20 minutes in the fridge. If you need to roll it out fast, you don't have time for it to chill, wrap it in plastic wrap real thin and stick it in your freezer for just a few minutes to just help that butter and that Crisco to harden up in there. Because it's the layers of the butter and Crisco with that flour, when you roll it out, that's what makes it flaky. It's like, has all of these thin layers of that butter and Crisco. So, get a big piece of plastic wrap, and I just take all of it out at the same time. There will be a little bit of flour. Sometimes there's a little bit that didn't get incorporated. I just kind of stick it into the dough. Make sure I get all of it. Be careful with the blade. This blade is so sharp. I have cut myself on it when I was trying not to cut myself on it. So be careful. The part that's closest to the blade tends to be the stickiest, just because, I mean, think about it, the blade is kind of warm, so it warmed it up. So just be real careful getting it off of there. Then what I do is take that saran wrap off, get another chunk of saran wrap, plastic wrap, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to just cut this chunk in two, because I'm going to make two different pies. I'm going to make 2 chicken pot pies. One for us, one to share. So I just kind of eyeball it. They feel the same. They look the same. Now, this is going to get wrapped up. Now look, there's one chunk of butter right here that didn't get incorporated. It's okay. I just squish it into the dough. Pie crust is one of those doughs though, you don't want to be like working with it a ton. It will make it tough. So I do my best not to, you want to squish it around a bunch. Don't squish it around a bunch. Do your best to just not work with a ton. I know this doesn't look like very much dough, but this will make a top and a bottom crust for a 9-inch pan right there. And then this baby over here, wrap these up. These are going to go in the fridge. I'll show you how to roll it out later. Once you pull your pie crust out of the fridge, unwrap it and split it in half, because half will be the bottom and half will be the top. We're gonna make the bottom first, and I always try to use a smaller piece for the bottom because it can be a little bit thinner, but we want the top to be a little bit thicker so that we can make a really beautiful crust. I put flour down on the whole surface, generous amount of flour, and I put flour on both sides so that my rolling pin does not stick to it. Now, this is the trick, is that you are putting pressure on it, but you're not trying to put pressure down in one spot where you just do a divot. You're putting pressure so that it is evenly distributing the dough. If your dough cannot move around like this, it means that it is stuck. So you need to pick it up occasionally. I pick it up and I make sure it can move. Give yourself lots of space. And our goal for the bottom crust is that it be 1/4 of an inch or less, because we don't want a really thick bottom crust that can't cook. Sometimes I'll flip it over, get a little bit more flour on there. You can see it's just so pretty, so easy to work with. It's okay if it does that and it crinkles up sometimes. When you think you're about close, you're like, I think it's about the right size, put your pie pan down to see, does it, because it's gonna go down and it needs to go up a couple inches and out. So it needs to go about 3 or 4 inches out from here, which I would say we're pretty close. Look at my nice deep pie pan. We're gonna fill it. And in order to get it in there, I just flop it together like this. Put the edge on the edge of your pie pan. Now we don't want to cut anything off until the top is on there. So any part that you're like, ooh, this part, it doesn't stick out quite as much as I would like. Sometimes what I'll do is find a part that's hanging over quite a bit. Since nobody's gonna see this part, and we just patch it in there. Okay, we have the bottom of our pie crust ready. We're working on the top crust. And if you think, I think it's about the right size, put your pie pan here. And really it just needs to be larger than the pie pan because it doesn't need to go down in there. We just needed to lay it over the top. And I'm going to cut out a few. I'm going to do some patterns here. And I want mine to be a pretty big crust on the side. So I'm not gonna cut too much extra off, only if there's a lot. If there's a lot hanging down, you don't want one part of your crust to be way thicker than everything else because it will cook at a different rate. So now we go through. And the first time I go around, my goal is simply to get it so that it is folded under. Then, once I have it all folded under, the two parts of the crust, you can see the two parts, I'm folding the top under the bottom. And what this does is it makes it so that all of this yummy sauce in here will not come baking out. And right now, I'm not trying to make the edge pretty. I'm just getting it gently folded under. Now that I have it all gently folded under, now I'm going to go around the crust, pinching and giving it that nice, pretty edge. Sometimes I have to go around twice to get it to be all consistent. And this is ready for the oven. The final piece to this is an egg wash. The egg wash helps the crust to get golden brown. It's not mandatory, but it does make the crust nice and golden. So if you've made pie before and you thought, why is my crust not nice and golden brown and it just gets too dark? You, my friend, need to do an egg wash.